The rain was unforgiving that morning, falling in heavy, slanted sheets across the rusted rooftops of the slum neighborhood of Mid-Hollow. It was the kind of morning where people hurried with heads low, as if the sky itself was ashamed of the world beneath it. In the smallest house on the narrowest lane, a girl stood in front of a cracked mirror, brushing her thick, frizzy hair with fingers that trembled slightly. Her name was Mira. Mira wasn't what anyone would call beautiful, at least not the way society defined it. Her body was large, round in ways the cruel kids in school never let her forget. Her eyes were wide but always downcast, as if she carried the weight of every insult spoken behind her back. Her skin was dark, her nose broad, and her voice was soft. So soft people often talked over her, not even noticing they had silenced her. At school, Mira sat in the last row, next to the broken window where the cold draft bit at her skin. She was invisible unless someone wanted a target. The other girls laughed about her in loud whispers. They called her the Blob, Cowface, or worse. The boys didn't even bother with nicknames, they just made sounds, imitating barn animals whenever she walked past. Mira never cried in public, but every night, when the light bulb flickered above her bed and her mother's snores filled the tiny room, she let the tears fall silently onto her pillow. She had only one solace: drawing. Mira sketched in the back pages of her notebooks. Faces she imagined, places she dreamed of, versions of herself with wings, standing tall among clouds where no one could mock her. It was the only world that didn't laugh at her. But everything changed the day he came. It started with a letter, an envelope so clean and crisp it looked alien next to the grime-covered mailbox. Her name was written on it in elegant black ink: Mira Devraj. Inside was a card, thick and white, embossed with a golden crest she didn't recognize. The message was simple: "You are invited." Beneath the words was a single name: Mr. Viren Rulhun. No address, no explanation. At first she thought it was a joke, another cruel prank. But when she showed it to her mother's face went pale. "You got this," she whispered. "From him." Mira had never heard the name before, but it was enough to make her mother sit down, whisper a prayer, and tell her she must go. "He's rich," her mother said, trembling. "But more than that, he's powerful. No one dares question what he does. If he's taken notice of you, Mira, you say thank you and go." That Saturday, Mira put on her only decent dress, a faded maroon thing that clung awkwardly to her frame. She braided her hair and wiped dust off her shoes. The driver came at exactly 7, as the card had instructed, in a sleek black car that didn't belong in her part of the world. The journey took them far from Mid-Hollow, through tunnels and up hills, past steel gates and guards with earpieces. Finally, they arrived at the mansion. It wasn't just a house. It was a palace, hidden in the forest like a secret kept too long. She was led into a hallway that smelled of lavender and old wood. Portraits lined the walls, paintings of people with the same sharp eyes, all staring directly at her. Then he entered, Mr. Viren Rulhun. He was tall, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit, with silver at his temples and a voice like silk soaked in wine. But what Mira noticed first was how he looked at her. Not with disgust, not with pity. No mockery in his smile, just curiosity. "You're even more perfect than I expected," he said softly. Mira's stomach turned. "I don't understand," she managed. "You don't need to," he replied, waving a gloved hand. "All you need to know is that you are safe here. You belong here, and your life is about to change." He showed her to a room, bigger than her entire home, with a canopy bed and a window that overlooked a garden she thought only existed in movies. She was offered food she couldn't pronounce, silk robes to replace her dress, and books, dozens of them, all about art, beauty, and transformation. For a week, Mira was left to explore, sleep, and eat. No chores, no yelling, no mirrors. The staff were polite but distant. And Mr. Rulhun? He watched, from balconies, from behind curtains, always there but never close enough to touch. On the 8th day, something shifted. She woke up to find all the doors locked. Her room, once a haven, had become a cage. The windows were reinforced. Her meals stopped arriving. Her phone, which she had almost forgotten, had no signal. And then the voice came. Through a speaker she hadn't noticed before, Mr. Rulhan spoke to her. Not with malice, but with the kind of cold detachment scientists use when observing insects. "You are the chosen one, Mira. They said you were ugly, but they didn't understand. They couldn't see what I see." Her heart thudded in her chest as she ran to the door, pounding until her hands ached. "Let me out!" she screamed. "What do you want from me?" Silence. Then a low chuckle. "I want the truth. I want what lies beneath the skin. And you, Mira, are going to help me find it." The first night in the locked room was filled with a silence so dense it seemed to press against Mira's ears. Every tick of the antique clock echoed like a drumbeat, counting down to something she didn't understand. She didn't sleep. How could she? The man who had offered her a dream had now turned it into a nightmare. And the worst part was, she still didn't know why. When morning came, she was startled to find a silver tray slid through a hidden compartment near the floor. It held food again, warm bread, cheese, and a glass of pomegranate juice so red it looked like blood. The hunger in her belly won over her fear. She ate cautiously, half expecting it to be poisoned. But nothing happened. That day passed like the one before. Silence, waiting, wondering. No more voices, no more explanations. Only the clicking of cameras embedded in the corners of the ceiling, silently blinking. Watching. On the third day, things changed. She woke to a soft humming sound coming from behind one of the walls. It was mechanical, steady. And then, a section of the wallpaper peeled back on its own to reveal a mirror. Mira gasped. She hadn't seen herself in over a week. The face that looked back wasn't the one she remembered. There were dark circles under her eyes now, her cheeks more sunken. But what was stranger was the mirror itself. It wasn't just reflecting her. In the background of her reflection was something that wasn't in the room. An ornate chair, a tall gilded screen, and a flickering chandelier. Behind her, in the mirror only, a room existed that did not exist in reality. She stepped closer. The moment her fingers grazed the surface, the voice returned, cold and clear. "Welcome to the Hall of Truth, Mira. Only those who have been stripped of the world's illusions may enter." She screamed. She demanded answers, but there were none. The mirror stayed there for hours, showing her things that weren't in the room. Visions of places that whispered with unease. By evening, the mirror was gone again. The next day, another one appeared, this time in the bathroom, fogging up slowly as she showered. And again, it showed her not just her reflection, but her surrounded by masked figures in long black robes. She was seated on a pedestal in the center of them, her eyes wide, her lips sewn shut. It was a trick. It had to be, but it felt too vivid. Her fear began mutating into something else. Not rage, not even curiosity. Obsession. Why her? Why was Mr. Rulhan interested in her, of all people? That night, she screamed at the ceiling. "Why me? What do you want from me?" This time, the voice answered. "You are the first one who still looks human after the truth is revealed. That is rare." What did that mean? She thought about the mirror again. The reflection of herself surrounded by faceless people. The sewn lips, the pedestal. Was it a vision, prophecy, or just a psychological trick to break her down? She began to write. On the back of old napkins and scraps of wrapping paper she found in the closet, Mira scribbled notes. She tracked what she saw in each mirror, what she ate, the patterns in the lights. Anything to stay grounded. Because she could feel it happening, the slow unraveling of her mind. The walls were closing in, not literally but mentally. Her own thoughts no longer felt private. She would think of something, and minutes later, the voice would reference it. She dreamt of being underwater, and the next day, the mirror showed her drowning. Then came the whispering. It didn't come from the speaker. It came from the walls. Faint, unintelligible murmurs. A woman's voice, maybe, or a child's. Or maybe it was her own voice echoing back at her, twisted by the madness blooming in her chest. The whispers said her name. They asked questions. "Why do you think you're here, Mira? Do you remember what you did? That last one chilled her. She hadn't done anything. Had she? The guilt crept in like mold under a door. Memories of school, of the kids laughing, of her anger. She had wished terrible things upon them. She had drawn pictures of them suffering, sometimes in vivid detail. But that was imagination. Everyone did that, didn't they? Still, the mansion felt like punishment, like a reckoning. On the sixth night, she heard music. Not classical or calming, but an old lullaby, the kind grandmothers hummed to frighten children. The kind that meant nothing good was about to happen. And then the door opened. Just a crack. She stared at it for a long time, not sure whether to trust the moment. When she finally stepped through, she found herself in a hallway lined entirely with mirrors. Not decorative ones, floor-to-ceiling slabs of glass, each showing her from a different angle. Some warped her image. Some showed her older, thinner, smiling. One showed her covered in blood. She stumbled back. At the end of the hallway stood Mr. Rulhun. He wore white now, his hair slicked back, his hands behind his back like a curator unveiling a piece of art. "You've made it further than the others," he said. "You're ready now." "For what?" Mira's voice was hoarse. "For your unveiling. For the world to see what beauty really is." "I'm not beautiful," she spat. He smiled. "Exactly." Then the lights flickered. The mirrors shimmered. And one by one they began to show other girls. Girls who looked like her. Curvy, awkward, quiet. Girls she'd never met. Girls who screamed from behind the glass. Each one mouthing the same word. "Run." Mira's feet refused to move. Her eyes bounced from one mirror to the next as the faces, those other girls, flickered in and out like ghosts caught in a signal. Each reflection moved just slightly out of sync with her own. They weren't mirrors anymore. They were windows, prisons. The glass fogged and cleared, and behind it Mira saw stories written in flickers. One girl curled in a corner, knees to her chest, rocking silently. Another stood screaming at an invisible audience, her mouth open in a howl, but no sound escaping. A third just stared, motionless, her eyes blacked out like censored photographs. "Who are they?" Mira asked, her voice almost swallowed by the humming in the air. Mr. Rulhun didn't look at her. His eyes moved slowly across the hallway of mirrors, as if he were admiring a gallery of priceless art. "They were once like you, misunderstood, laughed at, ugly in the eyes of the world, until I gave them purpose." His tone was soft, reverent, proud. Mira's hands curled into fists. "You trapped them." "No," he said, finally turning toward her. "I revealed them. The world only sees surface. I dig deeper, peel it back, and underneath all that shame and self-loathing, I find the core of what a person really is." He walked toward her, his shoes making no sound on the marble floor. "Do you know why I picked you, Mira?" She shook her head. "Because when they mocked you, you didn't disappear. You endured. And when you drew those pictures, yes, I know about them, you were creating worlds. Worlds where you held power. I admire that. You've been watching me?" "I watch everyone," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Mira took a step back, her spine brushing cold glass. "I want to go home." "There is no home now," he said simply. "Only truth. And if you let me, I'll help you become something extraordinary." Mira's stomach twisted. "What did you do to those girls?" Mr. Rulhun's smile widened. "I showed them who they were. Some broke. Some adapted. You will be the first to transcend." A low click echoed behind her. She turned, and the mirrors were closing in. The hallway was shrinking, the glass sliding silently toward her like the walls of a trap. Panic surged. "I don't want this," she shouted. "But you need it," he said. "Don't you see? Out there you were a joke. Here you're chosen." Mira ran. Her feet hit the cold floor as she darted through the shrinking gap at the end of the hallway. Behind her, the walls of mirrors crashed together with a shattering roar. But when she turned back, there was no broken glass. No hallway, just a smooth, blank wall. The mansion was changing. The soft, candlelit corridors she remembered were now narrow and dark. Doors that once opened freely now creaked with menace. The walls pulsed faintly, breathing, almost. The house felt alive. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She collapsed near a spiral staircase, too exhausted to scream anymore. And that's when she heard it. A voice. Not Rulhan's. A girl's. "Hello?" It whispered. "Is someone there?" Mira scrambled to her feet. "Who's that?" "I'm Zara," the voice said. It echoed from a grate in the wall, thin slits carved into old stone. "You're new, aren't you?" Mira knelt by the vent. "You're real? You're not just another mirror?" "No," the girl whispered. "I've been here longer than I can count. Maybe a year, maybe 10. The house, it plays tricks on you. How do I get out?" A pause, then a laugh. Sad. Hollow. "You don't. Unless he lets you." Mira pressed her head against the wall. "What does he want from us?" "He wants to find the one who can survive the mirrors, who doesn't shatter. He says we're all test subjects. Truth prototypes, he calls us. Why hasn't he done it to me yet?" "Because you're different," Zara said. "He thinks you're strong enough to handle the full truth. He thinks he can finish his work with you." Myra's skin prickled. "I'm not going to be part of his experiment." A rustling sound came through the vent. "Then listen carefully. There's a room in the West Wing. The only place he doesn't go. I think it belonged to his wife. The mirrors don't work there. You can hide. Maybe even find answers." "Why would you help me?" Another pause. Then, "Because I tried to kill myself last year. I found a shard of broken glass and cut so deep I saw my bones. But the house didn't let me die. Healed me, against my will. I don't want that for you." Myra's heart hammered. "I'll find you," she promised. "No," Zara said. "Don't. Just get out. End this if you can. Make it mean something." The voice faded, replaced by the low hum of the walls again. Mira stood slowly, dusting herself off. Her fear hadn't vanished, but something else had taken its place. Resolve. She walked with purpose now, weaving through the endless hallways, memorizing patterns in the paintings, the flickers in the chandeliers. She passed a door with dozens of locks and heard breathing on the other side. Another hallway was completely mirrored, and every reflection of her looked slightly wrong, twisted, or smiling when she wasn't. Finally, she found it. A door made of solid black wood, untouched by dust. A single symbol carved into it. A circle with a jagged line through the center, like a cracked eye. She reached out and turned the handle. No resistance. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was still and cold. The room was nothing like the rest of the mansion. No velvet curtains, no mirrors, just a simple bed, a writing desk, and rows of photographs hanging on wires, like a crime scene wall. Every photo showed a different girl, and beneath each one was a word. Failed. Mira stepped closer. She saw Zara. She saw the other girls from the mirrors. She saw herself, her photo freshly pinned, with the label pending. On the desk was a leather journal. She opened it. Mirror experiment. Subject number 42. Mira Devraj. Progress exceeds expectations. Emotional response to isolation is strong but not debilitating. May be the first viable candidate. Further psychological fracturing required before exposure to Room X. Mira flipped further. Objective. To capture a soul's transformation at the edge of self-perception. To force the subject into becoming what society claimed she never could be, beautiful in her rawest form. Truth. Unfiltered. She closed the book with shaking hands. Mr. Rulhan wasn't running an experiment. He was running a ritual. The journal trembled in Myra's hands as the weight of its contents sank in. This wasn't about beauty. Not really. It was about transformation, control, and the twisted satisfaction of a man who believed he could redefine worth by breaking people, turning their pain into proof of truth. She shoved the journal into her jacket and backed away from the desk, heart pounding. No mirrors in the room. No whispers. For the first time in what felt like forever, her thoughts were her own. But she wasn't safe. She knew Mr. Rulhun wouldn't let her stay in this room for long. Not if it was off-limits. Not if it held the secrets he worked so hard to hide. There was something else she needed. Answers. A way out. Her eyes scanned the walls again. There, tucked behind a faded tapestry, was a hidden hatch. She pried it open and found a narrow stairwell leading downward into the belly of the house. A draft rose up from the darkness. Cold, damp, smelled like soil and rust. She descended, one hand pressed against the wall for balance. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became, as if even the mansion didn't want to follow her there. At the bottom was a door. Heavy. Metal. She pushed it open. What she found wasn't a dungeon. It was a gallery. The room stretched wider than seemed possible, the ceiling lost in shadows. Mounted on the walls were hundreds of mirrors. Some cracked, some covered in cloth, some pulsing faintly like they were alive. And in the center of the room stood a throne made of glass. Sitting upon it, motionless, was a woman. She looked dead at first, pale, still, dressed in a flowing black gown with mirrored shards sewn into the fabric. Her hair fell over her face like a curtain, but Mira could see her chest rise and fall in shallow breaths. Mira stepped closer, and then the woman's head turned. Her eyes were cloudy, like fogged over mirrors, but they fixed on Mira with an intensity that stole her breath. "You've come," the woman said, her voice hollow, distant. "You're not like the others." "Who are you?" Mira whispered. "I was the first, before the mirrors, before the mansion twisted." A tremor ran down Myra's spine. "His wife." The woman gave a slow, aching nod. "He said I was beautiful, that he loved me, but it wasn't love, it was obsession. He wanted to preserve me, immortalize me, and when I aged, when my beauty changed, he built this house to trap it. To trap me." Her gaze turned distant. The mirrors feed on perception. They reflect not just what you are, but what others believe you to be. Over time, that reflection becomes real. He used that power, shaped girls into what he thought they were underneath. He called it purification. Mira clenched her jaw. "He's insane." The woman nodded faintly. "But brilliant. The house bends to his will. The longer you stay, the more it reflects his truth." "How do I stop it?" The woman pointed toward the far end of the gallery. "Break the origin. The first mirror. The eye. He keeps it hidden, guarded. But if you shatter it, the power dies. The reflections fade. We all fade." Mira swallowed. "We." The woman smiled, sad and soft. "This house is made of us. Our thoughts, our memories, our suffering. When you destroy the mirror, we'll finally rest." Her hands curled into Myra's. Cold, paper thin. "You're stronger than the others. You still see yourself. Hold on to that. It's the only thing he can't steal." Suddenly, lights snapped on overhead. The hallway behind Mira flooded with brightness. And footsteps. Mr. Rulhun. His voice echoed like thunder. "Mira," he said, not angry, but disappointed. "You weren't supposed to find her." "Not yet." Mira turned slowly, the woman's hands slipping from hers. "I know what you are," Mira said, "and I know how to end this." Mr. Rulhun stepped into the gallery, dressed in a robe of deep burgundy velvet. "You think truth can be destroyed? Truth cannot be shattered, only ignored." He raised one hand, and the mirrors on the walls flared to life. Images flickered across them. Mira being mocked as a child, crying alone in a bathroom, staring at herself in disgust. They weren't just memories. They were distortions. Magnified, cruel. "You don't belong in the world out there," Rulhun said, walking toward her. "But here you're a goddess, sculpted by suffering, made whole by pain. I'd rather be broken than become what you want." Mira spat. Rulhun stopped. His smile faded. "Then you leave me no choice." The mirrors hissed, cracked, reflected dozens of versions of him. Tall, looming, shadowed. Mira bolted for the far wall. Through the chaos, she spotted it, a frame unlike the others. Circular. Black glass. The surface shimmered like oil on water. The eye? She reached it just as the air behind her tore open. A screeching sound. A pulse of pressure that slammed her forward. Rulhan was screaming now, not words. Just sound. Rage. You don't know what you're doing. If you break it, everything ends. Mira stood, her knees shaking. Blood dripping from her forehead. I know, she whispered. She picked up a shard of mirror from the floor. And swung. The eye shattered. Not with an explosion but a sigh. All the mirrors in the room went black. The air grew still. And for a long moment, there was only silence. Then the gallery began to crack. Not just the walls but the world itself. Reflections faded. The girls' faces in the glass vanished one by one, their eyes closing in peace. The woman on the throne smiled and crumbled to dust. Rulhan fell to his knees, staring at his hands as they began to fade. His body dissolving like ashen wind. You were supposed to be perfect, he whispered. I was, Mira said, standing tall. But not because of you. Then he was gone. The mansion groaned like a dying beast. Walls shook. Glass split. Light poured in from the ceiling as the illusion collapsed. Mira ran. Up the stairwell. Through the halls. Past the shattered memories. Until she found the front door. Open now, sunlight blazing through. She stepped outside into air that felt real. Birdsong. Wind. Life. Behind her, the mansion collapsed inward, like it had never existed. And in her hand, she still held the journal. Mira stood in the clearing where the mansion once loomed, its sprawling shadow now reduced to a barren patch of scorched earth. The wind tugged at her clothes, cool and alive, a feeling she hadn't known for what felt like lifetimes. In her hand, the journal pulsed like a leftover heartbeat. It was all that remained of the house, of Rulhan, of the horror. She had survived. But survival wasn't peace. Not yet. Days passed. She found her way back to the city, a place that felt foreign now. The streets were too loud, the people too bright. Eyes followed her wherever she went. Not out of cruelty like before, but out of curiosity. Something about her had changed and people noticed. Still, no one asked questions. No one knew she had vanished. It was as if the house had erased her from the timeline. Like the girls before her, she moved in silence, carried the journal in her backpack, slept with it under her pillow, and every night, when the lights went out, she'd feel the faintest echo of glass cracking behind her eyes. The girls stayed with her, not as ghosts, not as voices, but as presence. Echoes of the ones who were lost, those who never made it out. Zara, the silent girl, the one who screamed with no sound. They were all part of her now. Mira could have burned the journal. She thought about it every day. But she didn't. Not yet. She needed people to know what happened. To know who happened. What obsession did. What happens when one person decides their view of truth is more real than another's identity. And what becomes of girls who are told, over and over, that their worth is something someone else can determine. So she began to write. Not just her story, but theirs. Her first post went up anonymously on a quiet online forum. The mansion with no reflection. A true story. No names. No photos. Just pages from the journal, carefully transcribed, and her account in vivid detail. At first, no one believed her. But then, something strange happened. Other girls started commenting. I had a dream about mirrors. Endless mirrors. I couldn't wake up. There was a man in a red robe. I never told anyone, but he said I was ripe for truth. I was in a hospital when I was 13. I remember him. He gave me a sketchbook. The stories piled up. From different countries, different timelines. Some remembered only fragments. Others had scars, ones they couldn't explain. One girl described an eye-shaped mirror that had haunted her nightmares since childhood. It spread, quietly, like a current beneath still water. People began asking who Mira was. She never gave her real name. Instead, she chose a title, The Last Reflection. And with it, she created a digital archive. A place for survivors. A place for the stories that didn't make the news. For girls who were never believed. For beauty never seen. And people came. Not just to listen but to speak, to be seen. One afternoon, months later, she sat in a park, her journal on her lap and a sketchpad open beside it. She hadn't drawn since the night Rulhun took her. Fear had turned her talent into a trigger. But now her fingers moved on instinct. She sketched a face, then another, and another. The girls. Not the broken versions. Not the ones twisted by the mirrors. But as they might have been. Before. After. Free. Someone sat beside her on the bench. A woman older, maybe 30. Scar beneath her left ear. She didn't speak. Just offered a tiny smile. "You found the archive," Mira said softly. The woman nodded. "I remembered enough," she replied. "Not everything, but enough to know I wasn't insane." Mira turned toward her. "Do you ever feel like it's still there? Like it's watching?" The woman's smile faded. "Sometimes, but it fades. A little more each time I speak the truth." They sat in silence. Two survivors. Two realities. Then the woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small handheld mirror. Mira tensed, but this one wasn't like the others. It was cracked clean down the middle. She handed it to Mira. "For you. A reminder that broken things don't have to be scary." Mira held the mirror. For a long time, she stared at her reflection. The scar on her forehead. The dark circles under her eyes. The tired curve of her mouth. Not beautiful. Not ugly. Just real. And finally, she smiled. Later that night, Mira uploaded one last entry to the archive. "They said I was ugly, that I didn't belong. But they were wrong. The truth isn't what someone gives you. It's what you claim for yourself. And if you're reading this, you're not alone. You never were. You were just looking in the wrong mirror." In a quiet, forgotten field where the mansion once stood, wildflowers bloomed where marble once reigned. No walls, no echoes, just the soft hum of life returning. And in the breeze, if you listened closely, you could almost hear glass breaking.